think being open and transparent is key, especially considering the fact that I am talking about financial topics. So today I will be going through my net worth as a 24-year-old living in England. Discussing your net worth, assets, your debts seems to be quite taboo. No one wants to talk about it. If you do, if you have too much, it's seen as a bad thing. If you don't talk, if you do talk, you seem like you're gloating. And then on the opposite side of things, if you don't have much money or you are in debt, it's a lot of people feel shame behind it, which they shouldn't. And that's why I think being able to talk about it and figure out ways to mitigate being in bad situations and to grow your wealth without having to go without completely is also a good thing. A lot of my assets are real estate heavy, not from any particular reason, pretty much just from the fact it's kind of how it's ended up. So my assets, I own 2 properties. The first property I bought at £90,000 when I was 18 years old. That property is now worth around £150,000. The second property I own is the property I'm in right now, which is worth around £330,000. Both of them are in the northwest of England. So I've gained quite a lot of equity when it comes to these properties. I bought this property that I'm in at the moment in 2024, May. For £250,000. We did get it for a steal. We got it £20,000 cheaper than it should have been. And the first property I bought just into the start of COVID, and I bought it in July of 2021 for £90,000. And as I've said, it's now £150,000. So we've made £60,000 in equity on the first property. And on the second property, we have made around £80,000. Obviously, that doesn't include also the deposits which are within it, which is also the equity. So that's the real estate portion. So another class of my assets is my savings. So I have around £6,500 in savings, which is mainly just for an emergency fund. I try not to keep much cash in the bank, to be honest. The next thing I've got is I'm starting, as some of you may have seen, a 0 to 100,000 in my stocks and shares ISA. I currently have just under £200 and that's a massive amount. I am trying to bridge the distance between the real estate side of things and the stocks side of things, so I do want it to be even. Obviously it's a lot of a difference at the moment, so I will try bridge that gap over the next probably 12 to 18 months. The next thing I have is I have a Nest pension, which I combined 2 of my last pensions with my current employer's pension, as they chose Nest pension. It was quite an easy process to merge them together. I have just over £17,000 in that pension, which is, I believe I match 6% with the employer, which obviously is ideal. If you can get free money, you should take it. One thing that is a bit concerning about our generation, my generation, probably between around 25 to 18, is the lack of understanding when it comes to pensions and when it comes to savings. So when you're saving in your bank and you're saving at a 1% interest, you are losing money. It's plain and simple. Inflation is eating your money. If inflation is 3% every year, which it has been a lot more recently, and you're gaining 1%, you're losing 2% of the value of that money every single year. I think that's one thing that we as a generation need to start to learn how to do, is to invest and to put your future first, to invest before you buy, to grow your future, even if it's in the background where you still do enjoy your life. You should still be trying to push towards your future, if that's either in a stocks and shares ISA or if it is for a purchase of a property. both of them are great options and will grow your wealth gradually over time. It's not going to be an overnight thing. You're not going to wake up and gain £100,000. It just doesn't happen. You do have to work, but buying an asset, owning an asset, and it growing over time will always outdo leaving it in your bank. The medium pension pot for someone of my age it's around £3,000, which obviously you have a lot of people coming out of university, so it's quite hard for me to compare my pension pot compared to someone else's when people are coming out of education and they haven't had much time to build that. So I think that's where your early to late 20s does kind of define your future. The longer you are into an investment, the longer it will compound, which is the main goal. The longer the better, the more money it gains, the more traction it gains, the bigger the pot becomes. That is what you're aiming for. But I understand that quite a lot of people are in a different situation to me. I started working when I was 16, 17, and a lot of people didn't start until they were 21, 22, 23, sometimes up to 25, obviously if you're a doctor and things and you've had to stay in education for longer. So I do understand it, but I think it is one thing that being in a pension is very useful. The tax benefits of it are great. You get tax relief. If you can take it, if your employer offers it, you should take it. So now my liabilities as a 24-year-old. So I have quite a lot of liabilities, as you can probably tell from having 2 mortgages. So I have both on residential mortgages. One of them is on a consent to let, which it pretty much means that it's on a residential mortgage, but the bank or the lender is allowing you to let it out due to specific circumstances. Mine, for example, is that I was moving out of the property within the fixed term and did not want to sell. Pretty much that's how it works. So firstly, my liabilities, I'll go from the oldest to the newest. So I don't have any personal debts. I don't have any personal loans. Everything is mortgages. So the debts that I have is, the first one on my first property is £90,000, and you may be asking, that's how much you bought the house for, how does that work? So I remortgaged the property after 2 years to be able to get the deposit for the second property. So the first property, £90,000 in a mortgage. The second property that I am currently in is £229,750. So my philosophy when it comes to debt in general is, if it's not secured to something that is making you money, I wouldn't do it unless it's your own residential property, which everyone has to have a place to live, and I would rather you have a mortgage than rent and pay someone else's mortgage. I think from a rental point of view, I quite like the fact that my mortgage is, I believe it's 3.96%. The yield on the property is around 9 to 10%. I believe it's about 9.5%, which obviously from a maths perspective, it is worth it. It doesn't work that way at the moment for me due to it being on a consent to let. It's added an extra 0.5% onto the mortgage, so the cost for the cash flow is quite low at the moment, but it still is worth it, obviously, to hold the asset and for the equity to grow for myself. I do think that owning a property in general is just a good buy. It's a very solid investment. It's a real investment. You can get your hands on it. You can see the bricks. And I think that's the thing that I like myself about that type of an investment, compared to obviously stocks, which I am starting to get into. I think from the perspective of seeing the growth over the last 100 years and seeing that you are getting on average between 3 and 6% growth every year in properties, especially in this area that I'm in at the moment. We're expected, I believe it's about 28.7% increase increase over the next 5 years from a Savills survey. So it's definitely worth holding it. It's quite hard to get them types of returns on something where you can leverage your money to the point of a property, because when you do go to invest in stocks, you are investing in that price at that time. If you put 5 to 10% down on a property, the growth that you get and the return of the equity is based off the property value, not off the amount that you've put in. So you could put 10% down on a £100,000 home. That's £10,000. That property could go up 10%. That 10% isn't 10% of the 10,000. You're not going to gain £1,000. You're gaining the 10% on the £100,000 value of the property. So it's £110,000. It's £10,000 in equity. You've made your deposit back off 10% growth, which it's very good for leverage. So we're going to work out the net worth of myself now. So the way that I'm going to do this, and the way that you can do this yourself as well at home, is you're going to add up all of your assets. You're going to minus all of your liabilities, and that will make your net worth. So my assets in total come up to £503,331.30, which does seem like a lot, but it's a compound of growth of being in the market, of being on the property market for 6 years and hitting it pretty much at its low and watching the rise throughout the C virus. So now for the liabilities. So as I've mentioned before, I have a £229,750 mortgage, and I also have, I'm going to have to check this, I have a £89,731 mortgage as well. I thought I'd be a bit more exact with the figures, which leads me to a liability amount of £319,481, which does not bother me in the slightest. Doesn't worry me. Obviously it's not a high amount, both of them are below 4% interest, so the residential one obviously isn't an income on the side of it, so it's not ideal, but at the same time it's a family home and it's one that we expect to stay in, and it has seen quite significant growth, as you've seen from my net worth. So overall my net worth comes out to, I'll say it, £183,850.30, which I would say is quite good for a 24-year-old, but it doesn't define who you are. A lot of people can have growth later on. They could make a business at 30, sell it at 40 for millions, and it's just, I think it's just it's a way for you to track your progress, which is kind of what I do. I quite like checking. I quite like knowing numbers, seeing how much things are worth. I quite regularly get property valuations. I did 2 weeks ago for this property and a week later for the first property. I think being able to track something and be able to know how much equity you have to be able to use for future applications, like being able to remortgage, refinance, and be able to go buy more properties or utilise that in the stock market, it is very useful. I think some of my tips from my life experiences when it comes to how I've grown my net worth is just getting in, just buy a property, just buy that stock, just get into it. I think that's the best way of doing it. There's no point in trying to time the market. There's no point in trying to wait to try to find a better deal, except for a property. If you find a property and you think it's overpriced, don't buy the property. But I think getting in on quite a good location, one that you can expect to see growth, is great. Buy them, rent them out, buy a property for yourself, even if, and this is one thing which a lot of people are worried to do, and I don't know if it's an ego thing, go buy a 1-bed flat, go buy a 2-bed terraced house. It will still grow in value. It doesn't need to be the perfect home from the get-go. A lot of people who are on £25,000-30,000 are not going to be able to buy a house that's £200,000. The bank will not lend it. So just get in, just go in and get the 110,000, 120,000, up to 150,000 pound terraced house and build it. Do things while you're living in it and enjoy the property, enjoy the growth while you're there. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people hold on to, the fact that everything should be perfect. Nothing's perfect. Nothing's perfect. Not your budget's not going to be perfect. You are going to misspend. You are going to invest in the wrong thing and you are going to lose money. But at the same time, you can gain money. And I think that's where having experiences and being able to learn from your mistakes it's an amazing thing. So I will be showing more ideas on how I was able to buy a property and how I was able to do the remortgage in a bit more detail, and how I'm planning to grow my stocks and shares ISA and eventually grow it to £100,000. So that wraps up my net worth as a 24-year-old living in England. I will be showing more tips on how I was able to buy a property, how I'm starting to do my stocks and shares ISA. All you need to do is subscribe and like. See you later.